Welcome to Powerboat Talk, the podcast where we talk everything performance boats with your host, Joe Rode.
Hello, and welcome to the newest episode of Powerboat Talk. I'm on today with a great, really famous racer from a very famous racing family. Been doing it a long time. Drives some of the coolest, fastest boats that are out there, and now he's actually a director of a race series. So it's been a nice transition into from racing to running races. So I'm here today with outboard racer Tim Seebold, who is the managing director of the F1 Powerboat Championship Series. So Tim, thanks for coming on.
Oh man, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's when I thought about doing this podcast for a couple of years, and one of the first things I did is start kind of making a list of guys that I wanted to have on, and believe it or not, you're like way up on the top. So, thanks for coming on. I'm really glad I got you on. So it's cool. So why don't you let us know what you're, obviously, like I said, you're running the series. So what's your day-to-day like these days? What are you up to these days?
You know, this time of year is kind of crazy because you are finalizing a bunch of things. We've got our first race coming up. And so it's really crazy because race sites, sponsors, you plan on everything happening way earlier than you think it'll take. And it always comes down to the last minute of getting all the details done and making it happen.
But that's just something that's, I don't know, it's just in the air or whatever, but you say race and you mean last minute, no matter what end of, putting on a race, running a race, going to a race.
What discipline of racing it is.
Yeah.
It really doesn't, but
yeah, man,
it's all good. We've got a bunch of exciting things going on, which I'm sure we'll get into, but it's a good time to be in powerboat racing. That's
awesome. Yeah, you've been doing this for a long time, and boy, I was trying to think of all the iterations of the series. Right, it was Champ Boat at one time, and then what was IOGP? Wasn't it that for a while?
IOGP. It was AMRA. It was NPA. Man, it was. I mean, it's been several things along the way. And that's only the national series. And then you did club racing all along the way. That was one of races that was put on by a Kiwanis Club or the Great Lakes Boat Club, which, I cut my teeth in the OPC category at the Great Lakes Boat Club. So it's been a learning experience along the way.
Yeah, you've hung on for a long time, man. You've because I know you've personally been involved for a long time, right? No, man, tenacious, right? Right. You must love it to keep hanging on. Well, you got out of the boat, so you slowed down a little bit, right? In one respect, so yeah, you're showing your maturity there.
Yeah, I'll tell you though, it's stepping out of the boat and into the promoter, series organizer role. Thank goodness, I've got a partner in John Schubert, and we work very well together, and it's a great partnership. But it is an eye-opener to go, because you're juggling the racers' expectations and needs. You're juggling the race site, which may or may not have the same sponsors that you have. And then you've got your sponsors with the series, and, everybody wants something a little bit different, and try as you may, it's very difficult to please everybody at one time. It was a lot easier to race. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. So, I think the first race is this weekend, so this will probably be out after that. I don't think I'm going to get it out that fast, but that's in. How do you say where that's at? Port Neches?
Port Neches.
Okay.
So down in Texas, south of Houston, and it's been a long time. I think this is the 21st running of the event. It's it's a multifaceted event. So there is, carnival, there's music, there's boat racing, there's, oh gosh, dog shows, and there's
no
just
way.
a lot of car show. There's just a lot of activity that gets the whole community involved and the outlying areas. So, for a 4-day event that they have down there, they'll draw 50,000 people.
Oh,
And
nice.
that's that's a lot, especially coming from a place that only has about I think, don't quote me on this, but around 15,000 people,
Wow.
in the city. So it's a great, it's a great story that they have progressed over the years and become a national event for powerboat racing. And they get it, they do a great job, and they just do a fantastic job for everybody.
Awesome. Sounds like your spectators or your sponsors have to be happy with 50,000 people coming through the gate.
They do. And it's spread out between the food and everything that's going on. So I guess the nice thing is the reason they get a bunch of people like that is because there's something for everybody. And you're seeing a lot more events, not only in boat racing, but look at NASCAR. Now they've got some music that's playing, as part of their events in certain areas. So you're seeing this more and more because it's got to be multifaceted, and that's how you get the big crowds. Pittsburgh was always that way at the Three Rivers Regatta events that they put on, but it's just it makes for a spectacle, and that's where everybody wants to come and see.
Yeah, great idea. Great idea. And then I saw on your site, I think you've got a schedule of 6 races this year.
We do, and actually we've got some new. We got a new race that we're just getting ready to announce.
Oh, nice.
So we haven't put it out, but I'm going to say it now because we've got boats, beats, and barbecue, and that's going to be in conjunction with one of our new partners, which is America Outdoor Events, and it's going to be in their hometown of Grove, Oklahoma. And then we're also going to do another event with them, which will be Lake Havasu. So up to the last 2 years, we did Havasu by ourselves, but now we're going to be part of a larger festival out there, and they're going to move, the event's going to move back a couple weeks. So we're going to be October 27th through the 29th. And it's going to be pretty crazy because they've got off-road racing, they got bull riding, they've got Nitro Circus going to be out there with us. We've got a fun run for the bigger offshore boats. So there's going to be all kinds of stuff going on, and we're just now finalizing all those details.
Wow, nice. Man, you got it going on.
Very excited. Very excited.
Yeah, so it's cool. So last year you brought back the Havasu Classic, right? Which is
2 years
historic.
ago.
2 years ago. Okay.
2 years ago. So that's when Havasu had their 50th anniversary of the London Bridge, and it's really cool because we had a reunion out there. So the London Bridge was what, 70? 1970, I think it was complete. And so a lot of guys that raced out there, including my dad, they raced out there. The races started there in 64.
Oh my gosh.
So my dad raced out there the first time, I think in 69. And, but Kenny Kitson, Jimbo McConnell, and a bunch of old guys came out to the reunion, and everybody had a fantastic job.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Great history with that race. We always watch that every year. That was a big staple out here. So,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Thanksgiving. I mean, for the first probably 15 years of my life, I never, we had Thanksgiving in Havasu.
That's a good memory. Well, since you brought it up, I think most people know, but why don't you go back and let us know kind of how you got started, and tell us some things about the Seebold name that people might know about.
Well, the racing really started with my grandfather, Bill Seebold Sr. So in 1939, he went to a boat race, and instead of doing what everybody else would have done, which would have been buy a competitor's boat and then learn how to drive it, he built his own boat. I always found that so peculiar with my grandpa. Another thing about my grandma and grandpa was the fact that neither one of them really swam.
Oh my gosh.
So my grandfather started a Mercury dealership in his mom's basement, and then progressed, and that was Granite City Boat and Motor. And then we were from Granite City, Illinois, and then he progressed from there. Had Honda motorcycles for a while in the boat store, and I don't think the Honda people liked that, so then he just went strictly boats. But he raced from 39. He won 2 championships, 54 and 56. And then he quit kind of early because of my dad's racing. So my dad started when he was 11 years old. And so he progressed. My grandpa ran a couple times when my dad was in the Army. And then he figured, when he ran the boat and didn't do so well in it, and then my dad came home and did real well in it, he was like, yeah, it's time for me just to help him. So that was all in back then, my dad ran stock outboards, he ran mods, he ran alkies, and then in about the late 60s, he started in the OPC, which is the outboard performance craft category of APBA, which are the tunnel boats. And then he even ran Long Gone in 69 and 70 for Les Brown. So that was a 7-liter hydro.
Oh, wow.
So
I didn't know that.
At that time, that was one step below the Unlimiteds. And then he ran both of those for a little bit. And then his role in with the Team Mercury kept getting more and more, and then started building boats for him. Because, Renato Molinari was the boat builder at the time, and then he switched to OMC, and so Mercury needed, a boat builder, and then that kind of lent my dad, that was his foot in the door to start building boats. So somewhere around 73, I think, is the first time we started building boats.
What was it? Was it a Seebold Eagle? Is that what I remember?
No, at the very beginning, there was a hydro runabout builder in St. Louis. His name was Andy Laurie, and he was a fantastic woodworker. And my dad teamed up with Andy, and the first ones were called Seebold Laurie Tunnels.
Okay.
And then that didn't last real long. I think I still have one of the T-shirts though. And then Andy trained B.B. Crum, who was our main boat builder for forever. And so he trained B.B., and then B.B. started building them. And we built them in, my dad had where we lived was on about, 5 acres of ground. And we had 2 rental houses on the property. And one of them was above a 3-car garage. And we started building the boats in that 3-car garage underneath the tenant's house, our apartment. Yeah.
Man.
So it was small beginnings, just like everybody else, it was a hobby that became your full-time job. And kind of around that same time, my dad was a Mercury marine dealer. He was Mercury. He sold cobalts and what Mark Twain's. I think he sold Glasstrons. And so my grandfather had a boat store in Granite, And then my dad had a boat store in Concord Village, which is South County, St. Louis, probably 40 minutes apart, let's say.
Okay. Oh, different stops. I was kind of thinking he took over. So different. Okay.
Different shops, yeah. And when my dad got going, he'd go over and take a boat off my grandpa's inventory, bring it over and sell it at his shop to get going.
Whatever it takes, right?
That's right. That shows the innovation right there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, just to start making your own boats and then get in it and go 100 and whatever miles an hour. I mean, that's, I don't know. That takes a lot of fortitude right there. Obviously, he did them right, but I mean, you got a lot to learn. And then when he was building them, was he building for competitors right out of the gate, or was he just kind of building for himself initially?
Well, obviously the first couple were his.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we started building them for, everybody would come and stay at our house when they were getting a boat. So it was really cool growing up because, you'd have anybody and everybody would stay at our house at some point, and that was just how it was back then. So we had, Reggie and Earl Bentz, obviously, Reggie Fountain, and, you'd have the guys from Europe come over, Case Vandervelden, Tom Spalding, Bob Spalding, and Tom Percival, and, Jackie Wilson and Craig Wilson. So you'd have the guys from Canada come down, and they didn't have to necessarily run Mercury's to come and hang out at our house, So Bert Sarah would come down, Spencer Dunn, and a lot of times you traveled in a group going to the races. So going out to Havasu or Parker or to California or to Florida races at Miami Marine Stadium, there'd probably be 5, 6, sometimes up to 10 carloads going in the same direction together.
Yeah, how fun. Do you remember back in those days too? It might have, maybe not that early, but a little later on. How was it with because you brought up like Molinari was running OMCs, and then there was a true factory war kind of back then. I mean, they were they were both competitive and going back and forth with each other. That had to be really, really interesting.
It was, and when I really didn't participate in the boats by that time, because by the time I kind of got into it, all that stuff was winding down. But when I was younger, which they'd never allow this now, but I used to ride in a truck with the mechanics, Shunky and Welton and Rick Welch and Gene Trickle. And I would ride there. So I'd go to races with those guys on the road. So it was a lot of fun. But the one thing I'd always remember, obviously St. Louis was always a big race for everyone, especially the factories, because they were fighting tooth and nail. But we'd go up to Mercury. I'd go up there with my dad, and then I'd stay with some of the mechanics, because their sons would be around my age. Jimmy Herring, Bobby Herring's son, or
oh my gosh,
Jimmer Cabasta. Just a bunch of us would hang out together and ride bicycles around Oshkosh back then.
Oh my gosh.
So it was a lot of fun. And those guys would be testing, prior to the race. Then they'd come down to St. Louis and test prior to the race. And then, right before the big weekend.
And your dad was always a Mercury guy?
My dad was always a Mercury guy. Yeah.
Yeah. No stories of OMC coming after him?
None that I can really remember about. The only thing that we did is we built those match race boats for OMC when they had the sporty boats down in Miami Marine Stadium. And they had that match race. We built all of those boats. And it's funny, we got a couple pictures from Jimbo, and, OMC would end up with an factory Mercury boat somehow. And one time it was a Long John Scotch whiskey boat, and my dad's got a picture of Jimbo and the goat. Right before they get ready to test it, they're standing next to the boat. So it's pretty funny.
Wow. And then, when, at what point did you what got you in the boat? And then your brother was in the boat too.
So my brother and I actually, we started at the same time. Michael's 5 years older than I am. So we started in J Hydro. So in 72, that's when we started in J Hydro, and we would run locally. Tim Chance was a boat builder, and he was a buddy of my grandpa's. And so they make little hydroplanes out of Luan, and we'd run those for a year. And that's about, maybe you'd get 2 years out of them, and then you'd have a bonfire and at the end of the year. But we had about 7 or 8 kids that were around the St. Louis area. John Bogosian, his dad, Paulie Bogosian, raced with my dad. Jack, his grandpa, raced with my grandpa. So there's a lot of, as you know, in powerboat racing, there's a lot of second, third, fourth generation racers that are in powerboat racing. So when your dad's doing it, that's what you want to do. Every kids are looking up to somebody, and they're heroes, and that really stems from the activities that they like. And it turns out for me, that was my dad, my grandpa, and my older brother. So my mom would always have to try and deter me from boat racing because that's the only thing I wanted to do. So we started together, and we ran J Hydro, and then my brother, was bigger. So when you're about 14, maybe 15 at the most, then he could run SG, which was a tunnel boat. And that's the first tunnel boat my older brother ran, was a Sport G, a Kitzencraft in St. Mary's, Ohio. That used to be the Nationals back then.
What size engine?
I think an SG was a stock 85.
Okay.
Yeah. So we just kind of progressed from there. I ran J Hydro for a little bit, and then we've always raced dirt bikes. So then I just ran a lot of dirt bikes. My dad ran dirt bikes. My older brother.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So we kind of progressed, and I ran dirt bikes because I was kind of in between ages of going to the next level. So then I ran dirt bikes until I was about 14. Ran a couple sporty races, but we were Mercury, and Mercuries weren't really the engine of choice in the sporty category. The 75 Stinger owned that class. And then finally, when I was 16, then I started running Mod 50 at the Great Lakes Boat Club races. And back then they were the, I think they were the AMRA races back then. So Rick Keller was the promoter in charge of the AMRA series. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. You always knew you weren't the dirt bikes weren't going to be it. It was going to be the boats.
Yeah. For me, I even did a lot of road racing motorcycles, and I had my pro license, and I ran a lot of the nationals, but it was always, it was good. My mom and dad liked me doing it until my dad came to Daytona and watched me race one time in the rain. He's like, "You got to get back in the boat." So yeah, it was a really good thing for me because my grandpa and I, my dad at that time, when I was 16, 17, 18, he was racing all over the world, and that was really at the height of going back and forth to Europe and everything like that. So my grandfather really took me to the races. So we'd pull my Mod 50 boat behind his Delta 88, and head up to Chicago, and it's really cool for me because guys like Jimbo McConnell probably taught me as much how to drive a tunnel boat as my dad and my grandpa did, because he'd give me pointers. Terry Leatherby, Fred Miller. I mean, you used to you'd go to a Great Lakes Boat Club race and run Mod 50, and it would be Chuck McKay, Chris Bush, Bobby Herring, Jimbo McConnell, John Guimo, Terry Leatherby, Fred Miller, myself, and Bobby Buckley. And I mean, that was a local race. So, I mean, if you could win a little bit of prize money and a trophy, I mean, that's world-class people you're running against.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great training ground, right? Just right from the beginning, you're racing against the best, and you guys are both you're all learning. And
exactly.
Yeah.
And the older guys were so gracious because, hell, we didn't know what we were doing. I didn't. First time I ran Mod 50, I ran it down in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And Terry Leatherby passed me on the outside and turned right, what seemed like at that time, right in front of me. And, you're like a deer in the headlights because you're still learning how to turn that thing. So it was a steep learning curve because you had to learn in order to be safe on the course. And they all would help you. And I really got to hand it to them because it was so gracious of them to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then, on the time hanging, I mean, sucks that your dad was gone so much, but a kind of a blessing that you got to spend that time with your grandfather and do that. So he probably loved it too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's my grandfather, he went to races with me for a long, long time, and I'm so thankful that I'm not one of those guys that has to go, boy, I wish I would have spent more time with him, because I did.
Yeah. Now, didn't at some point, weren't you and your brother and your dad competing against each other at some point when you got all the way to the top stuff?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for a long time, I was racing SST 140. This would have been in the IOGP days. So I was racing SST 140, which was the feeder class for the Formula Ones. And then my dad and my brother would run the Formula Ones. And I got a couple people gave me an opportunity to run a Formula One boat. Smiling Jack gave me my first opportunity to run a Formula One boat. So I'd run the SST 140 class, which is a 30 lapper. They'd have the Formula One boat sitting on the ramp. I'd jump into it and then go run a 50 lapper. And this was all before power steering. Mm-hmm. So then I was having some success, in we raced all different kind of classes. Some of them I was successful in. Some of them, like Mod VP, I wasn't too successful in because
you raced Mod VP?
Oh man, I wrecked a lot of them things. I think at one time I wrecked like 9 races in a row.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But then Felix Sorales gave me an opportunity to run the Don Q boat because his son Felix Jr. ran the offshore boats for the Dubai team, the Victory team. So I filled in, and after filling in for 3 races, I was still racing both SST 140 and Formula One. But after the 3 or 4 races I was filling in, I was second in the championship. So then they kept me racing all year under the Don Q banner. And it was really good because that year, my dad, myself, and my brother, we got first, second, and third in the championship.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And you got first?
No, my dad got first. I got second.
You gotta let the old man win, right?
Oh no. I'll tell you what, when we raced against each other,
Yeah.
I mean, my dad had to break my brother and I apart a couple times, but I don't care if I got third to last, long as they were the two behind me.
Do you have some times when didn't talk for a while?
Oh yeah, or worse,
Yeah. Yeah. Uh,
over props, or you know, it's just it's competitive, and at the time you don't look at it like that. That it's helping you because all you're seeing is you want to beat them, you want to win, you want to be as good as them, because you kind of, especially if you're the youngest one, you kind of got a chip on your shoulder that you want to prove that you're worthy of competing against them, and the Seebold name. So it was very competitive, very competitive. But and my brother and I have talked about this, quite a bit after the fact, is the fact that, that's how we got to be better. That really escalated our skills, taught us not only how to drive the boat, but how to set the boat up, how to work on the motors, because not everybody can do all facets of it. Some guys are great drivers. Art Kennedy, if you remember
I
Art
remember
was
the
a
name, yes.
fantastic driver, but he wasn't the guy that could set the boat up. And so it really helps, especially when for consistency, and where you're going, you're racing in, uh, the intercoastal or a lake or a river.
Hmm.
It just is throwing saltwater versus freshwater, altitude versus, sea level. So there's just so many things that play into it, especially this is prior to CNC props. So the propellers were a whole nother aspect of it. And that was really my grandpa's forte, was the propellers.
What were you using? You weren't using, was it Mercury stuff or was there aftermarket stuff?
You you'd use a variety, but we ran Mercury props a lot, and then my grandpa would modify them,
Just
and then
massage them.
yeah, and then you'd have my grandpa would make some of his own castings, and then DeWalds would make castings, and then Second Effort made castings, and there's Rolla made castings. So when Mark Wilson um, worked for Phil Rolla, we were my brother and I were the importers into the United States of
Hmm.
the Rolla propellers.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
So when you talk about setup on the boats and everything, let's talk about the current boat, because aren't they, again, I don't know a ton of the specifics, but aren't they are the motors like a spec motor, or they're much more regulated than they were as far as what everybody's running? Is that correct?
Well, it's boat racing, just like car racing, has gone through tremendous changes. Um, it's like Formula One car racing. They have engine rules, they have specs, and they've got to abide by them. It's they've got weight limits. In boat racing at one time, when it was Mod U or OZ, it's hey, run what you brung, pretty much. Um, but then they started regulating that. So even when the 2.5 Mercuries came out to compete against the 2 liter Mercuries, the 2 liter Mercury was a race only Pacific specific block that they used. And then you started seeing the S3000 come in, and they put some regulations on it to keep the two competitive. Um, but then at the end of the day, the bigger cubic inch would get off the dock better to the first turn. And so that's where you kind of saw the changing of the guard in the Formula One class. Well, then those kept regulations kept coming down, and it's a cost savings too,
Sure.
because you're trying to get more people into the sport. And what you don't want to do is have where the guy with the biggest checkbook wins the race. So we took that one step further, and there's a lot of guys that have had their hand in this. John Schubert, even Chris Fairchild has helped on this, but that's how we came up with the current class structure. And what we did is it slowed them down a little bit, especially at the beginning. But like everything else, once the racers run it, and then they start finding the tweaks, the engine modifications, what is legal, what they can do, how to tune it, the boat, the propeller, how the overall package works together. Now you've seen those speeds keep going back up. So it's really been interesting. And the thing about what we've tried to do with our series is to bring more of the Formula One boats together at one time. So our goal is always to have 20 plus Formula One boats on the water at one time, because that gives us our best show.
Oh, you're getting that many guys out there. Wow, that's amazing.
Yes. So this coming weekend we're going to have 21.
Nice.
And so at the end of the day, the racers want it competitive for them, but the race venue and the sponsors want it competitive, so that way it's entertaining for the crowd, a good live stream show or television show. So everybody wants a little bit something different from it. But at the end of the day, it gives us all what we need, which is competitive racing. So we've got about 4 or 5 different engine packages that are legal. So you could race an SST 120 with certain modifications. You can run a 2.5 Optimax that's direct injected with no modifications. You can run a 2.5 carbureted, which is based off of fission block with no porting modifications. You can run a Yamaha with certain restrictions. You can run an OMC with certain restrictions. And now we have the Apex 200, which is the new 4-stroke that fits in nicely with the performance level of the rest of them. So it gives everybody that has equipment opportunity to come and participate and race.
So the 4-stroke slots in performance-wise. I mean, they race against the 2-strokes.
It does, yeah. So last
nice.
year was the first year for the Apex 200 to be legal in the series, and it was on pole at one race. It hasn't won a final yet, but Dustin Terry was running very well with it last year. And he would have finished second in Havasu, but he hit a buoy trying to get to first place. So, we've got a good group of guys that are running him. At first, they were putting him on existing boats. Now they have boats that are built for the 4-stroke because it is a little bit heavier. And with the little bit heavy, then it's got a little bit different characteristics because the power band is a little bit different. The torque's a little bit different. So it's all about meshing the right propeller with the boat, with the setup on the boat for the motor.
Yeah. And if they were competitive, sounds pretty competitive in the first year, like you said, they're going to figure it out. There's so many variables. Now that you mentioned the weight, they'll get it figured out, and it'll probably be tough to beat at some point.
And they're progressing. They've got them to come off the beach better now, which is, it's so hard to make up that position that you lose going from the start dock to the first turn.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And all of that stems from the good thing about our format on the series is you qualify, then you run 3 heat races, and the better you do, the further in the back that you start. So if you win the first heat race, you start dead last on the second heat race. So, and it goes by combined points, and these points count for the overall championship and the race. So those heat races get your starting position then for the final. And then the final is what you get the prize money on and the overall winner. But all the points that you accumulate all weekend go towards the championship.
And that's the way you're doing that too on the heat races. That gives it, the guys have to drive through the field, so it's probably real competitive. Good for the fans.
It is, because that's some of the best racing there is.
Yeah.
You know, because you take somebody that maybe can't win a final, but I'll tell you what, if you start them in front and they get a good start, they can win the heat race. And that's how you see some of our younger drivers progressing. All of a sudden, they start figuring out a little bit more. They start getting the setup right, and they start learning how to go through the corners and keep their boat speed up. And then they win a heat race, and all of a sudden they're creeping up there in the final. And then before you know it, you know, some of our young drivers that really haven't been around that long, Dylan Anderson, his dad raced, Mike Quindazzi, his dad was a racer. But all of a sudden you're starting to see those guys get the better finishes in the finals. So it's a stepping stone, and it's not easy. The competition is tough.
Yeah, 21 boats, man.
Oh yeah, and then you've got lappers, and the lappers, you know, no matter how hard you try and how hard they try, they're still racing their race too. So you have to drive around them. You know, it's in the rule book that it's the overtaking driver's responsibility to make the pass safely. So the bottom line is the guy you're passing doesn't have to get out of your way, because he's racing for position too.
Yeah.
Just not
that's
the
nice.
same one you're racing.
Yeah. Huh. That's very cool. So, there's probably some people out here that haven't seen F1 boat racing, but the greatest thing about F1 boat racing, we all know, is how they turn. And it's incredible to watch one turn. So what is the art when a guy gets in an F1 boat for the first time? I mean, how does, take us through the mechanics of that? How do you do it? And how do you do it for the first, I mean, like you said, when you were in that 50, when they turned in front of you that first time, so it obviously takes you a little while before you figure it out.
That's right. So in a Formula One boat race, you are never sitting idle. You are constantly trimming the boat. You're constantly maneuvering the boat. And you got to remember, so these boats weigh between 1,175 pounds and 1,225 pounds, depending on what motor you have. That is boat, driver, gas, propeller, safety equipment after the race as you come out of the water. That's minimum weights. So if you have a strong crosswind, you're changing lanes going down the straightaway without wanting to. So that's the first thing you deal with. The other thing that all boat racers deal with that no other discipline of racing does is the course is constantly changing. So no two laps are ever the same. Where you'll have wind in one spot, you won't have it in another spot. The water gets rough, and you have a bump or a large wave in the corner in turn one, and before you know it, it's coming down the straightaway, and then it'll eventually end up in turn four. So you're constantly after monitoring this, and you're watching the water, you're watching the other competitors as you're doing all of this, and you can't go directly behind another boat because of the rooster tails. So especially on a tunnel boat will ride that rooster tail up and blow over if you try and go right behind a guy, not to mention you can't see. So it is one of the hardest vehicles to drive, racing vehicles to drive, because of all this aspect. So when you're getting in the boat, you're accelerating, and to accelerate, you trim the engine out. When you trim the engine out, it picks the front of the boat up, and you're trying to pack as much air underneath the front of the boat as you can to get it to accelerate. As you accelerate, the boat comes up, and then as you pick up speed, you're trimming the boat down so that way you can lay it over. Because if you don't trim it down, too much air is underneath for the amount of speed you have, and you'll blow it over. So as the water conditions and the wind conditions change, that's a balancing act, because the boat's bouncing all over, it's all over the water. They're only 16.5 to 17 foot long. So they're bouncing all over the place. Now, as you get it on top speed and you got it rolled over, that's how you get the most speed, because it picks the tail of the boat up. That's how you start getting more RPM and the higher top speeds. Now, as you get to the corner, you're coming into the corner, you're trimming the boat in, so that way more of the running surface gets wet, and then that allows you to be able to take the sharp corners. Now, as you do that, soon as you trim it down, you're doing this stuff simultaneously. You're trimming it down and you're turning all at the same time. And soon as you get a quarter way through the turn, you're on the up trim to get it to trim up so you can accelerate, but you can't trim it up too fast. Otherwise, the front end will skate out and you won't hold your line. So it's a balancing act, and then on top of it, then you're racing guys at 120 miles an hour. So it's what I always said is it's a 120 mile an hour chess game. So you're trying to outthink and outmaneuver the guy in front of you. So you have to know how your competitors drive. So you need to know, do I need to be outside and then go to the inside, halfway through the corner, on the outside of the corner, swing your boat out, because you got to know how some of the guys drive. Because some guys drive pin to pin, some guys move all over the place. So that's I guess that's how you get your experience, and the veterans really shine when it comes to that.
Yeah. Now, are you doing this? What kind of? I mean, are you driving off the tack? Or do you have any kind of a trim gauge or trim pin markers or anything? Or is this just all feel, seat of your pants?
Well, everybody drives different. Some guys drive by. Pretty much everybody's got data acquisition in their boats nowadays. They for sure have a trim gauge in there. But the problem with that is if the water gets rougher, if the wind comes up, so your trim settings won't be the same. So for me, it was always by the seat of your pants. So I would use the trim gauge and the data acquisition to look at after I got out of the boat. And mainly that was for propeller selection, propeller modification, how to run. I mean, even the data acquisition will tell you how you can put the laps you ran together to make the best line, and it'll show you the best line of the course.
Oh, no kidding. I didn't know that you use that in the boat like that.
Yeah, you can, but you're going to use that while you're out of the boat.
Sure.
You've got to have that feel of the boat too. I would use the trim gauge to start, and then after that, I'd never look at it. Most of those gauges are for testing, not necessarily for racing.
Gotcha. Well, that's very cool. Thanks for taking us through that. I like that. I like that part of it. Now, I know in the old days they would just use like a pulley cable steering on them, and you mentioned power steering. Are they using power steering now in the boats?
So we still use the cable steering, and one of the reasons that we use cable steering instead of hydraulic, there's a couple different types of hydraulic steering. Weight is critical in our boats. So if you put 5 pounds in the front of your boat, you can tell the difference. So weight's critical. The speed at which the steering reacts is very critical. So with a hydraulic steering, it's too slow. And so we use cable steering, and it also gives you feedback. So as you're driving the boat, you get the feedback from the steering wheel and the torque of the engine, and that helps you feel the boat and control the boat. Now, the bad part is with the bigger gear case that we have, which is the number 4 Mercury gear case, it's got a lot of torque on it. So now what we do is in between the steering wheel and the front pulley, we put an electric power steering unit. So they've got electric power steering units on just about anything and everything these days. UTVs, ATVs, cars that they don't want to, the alternator or the power steering unit to absorb the horsepower. So they'll use an electric unit in the smaller horsepower cars. So now we're using DCE Motorsports makes a racing unit that we feel is the best one out on the market, and that's what we use. And that way you can have different size drums in front of you that the cable goes around, so you can speed or slow down the steering on how quick it reacts.
Gotcha. But you got that electric motor to take some of that torque off you from the...
It takes the torque, and then on the DCE models, you've got settings that you can put torque back into it.
Oh,
so
interesting.
It's driver preference.
Oh, very interesting. So, okay, tell me too about you guys. You guys built a pretty cool thing. You built a 2-seater boat that you take to the races. How'd that come about?
Well, you know, when I say we, our family, has had a 2-seater for many, many years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
We used it constantly. The first version of it was the passenger sat behind the driver, and this is before you were even strapped into boats. So the person in the back literally was hanging on to like trash can handles. Well, as it progressed, and obviously safety comes into play.
Can you say, liability insurance? And...
Yeah, exactly. Oh no, we've always been okay. So then we wanted to have a better experience for the passenger, because a lot of times the passenger is a VIP, a sponsor, a city official, somebody like that, and the better experience that you can show them the actual feel of it, the more it's enjoyable and they really get the correct feeling.
So literally scaring them to death was probably not a good idea.
No, not really. Although Mercury had one back in the day, and the first ride that I ever took, Case Vandervelden was the driver, and I was sitting behind him. I could not even see out of the thing, you know, but it was enough that, you know, it scared the hell out of you. That's for sure. But now the newer ones that we made are side by side. So the passenger sits right next to the driver, so you're seeing everything firsthand. So that's what we wanted to do. So now we've got a side by side. We've got the Mercury new Apex 360, the V8 race motor on it. And it works perfect for our boat because it's bigger to carry the weight of 2 people, plenty of torque and horsepower, and it really gives a good ride. So now what we're trying to do for this year is step it up. We've got gauges, everything that GPSs, everything that they can see. But our next addition to the boat is going to be a camera, so that way you can not only see outside, but then you could also see the passenger's face. So
that's fantastic.
That's what we want to do, so that way when they get out of the boat, you can do a split screen and give them a video of their ride.
Oh, fantastic. And didn't I see, maybe it was at Havasu, did you guys run some kind of a contest or something where some people could get a ride in the boat somehow?
We did. We've had a long-standing relationship with Romer Beverage, which is the AB distributor. Chuck Romer, used to always support us when we came out there, and his son, Chip, has always been a supporter, not only of the Seebold family, but of powerboat racing. And so we ran a contest in conjunction with them, and then some winners got a ride in the 2-seater. But, Havasu is got a lot of old racers out there. And so Dave Bush does motors for some of the European teams, and he's located in Havasu. He's a friend. Tara Lejo she was a watercraft stand-up jet ski champion. She rode for Yamaha for years. Kenny Roberts and Eddie Lawson. So I got to be friends with all of those people, and so we took them all for rides in the 2-seater. So it was so funny. King Kenny Roberts, he's like, I normally don't do this kind of stuff because everybody tries to impress me, and then they end up messing up. I said, you don't have to worry about that. I'm going to show you what this thing can do, and I'm not going to try and scare you or anything else, because he's a motorcycle guy, not necessarily a boat guy. But it was a lot of fun giving those guys a ride and seeing their reaction, because they're world-class racers, and for them to get in a tunnel boat and just rant and rave about how cool it is, it really hits home with me.
Yeah. You talked about it earlier, and I've talked about it with several of my guests. The X factor in boat racing is like what you said, the water conditions. There's nothing like it, especially when it's rough in a race and it's just coming at you from all different directions. And so I think no matter what you've done on land, a boat's just a whole different deal.
It's a different animal, totally. It's, even when I did a lot of the road racing, it's incredible. That's probably the closest thing that I ever raced to that had the concentration level necessary to go out and compete at a national level. But boat racing still is more. The concentration level for me was longer, and you had to just be totally focused 100%. And I don't know if it's from doing it for such a long time or what, but that was one thing that I was always fortunate that once I got in that boat, nothing ever came into your mind but what you were doing in that boat. And that's so critical.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's probably one of the things that help you be successful, that you're able to do that. Because I'm sure there's guys that just can't get the mind part of it down like other guys can. Yeah.
Well, in a lot of the younger racers now in other disciplines, they have a rider coach or a racing coach or something on those levels, and it's not they're teaching them some techniques on riding, but the guys know how to ride. When they get to be a pro motocrosser, they know how to ride. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. Now, what they might not be able to do is handle all the distractions and the mental side of it, of competing with world-class racers, and have to deal with the mind games or the pressure of winning a championship or sponsor pressure that the riders normally end up, or racers normally end up putting on themselves, because they want to fulfill their obligation with their sponsors.
Yeah, good point. So, are you going to do something else this year with a 2-seater, or will people have an opportunity to do that again? Get a chance to ride in it?
Yes, we don't have any of the contests lined up yet, but we will be using it. And hopefully we will use it for some contests like that.
Okay, cool.
But we don't have anything lined up at this point. Besides, it'll be at every single event.
Okay, awesome. Well, people can go on to it's F1 Powerboat Championship.com, I believe, right?
Yes, it is. F1 Powerboat Championship.com. You can see us on Facebook. We've got a bunch of YouTube stuff out there. A lot of race videos on our Facebook page. That's where we do the live streaming. One of the races that we're doing is in my hometown this year. So it's the Lotto Power Fest. So we're going to be racing in conjunction with the OPA offshore guys, which is going to be fun. We're also co-producing the Midwest Challenge, which is going to be on the 11th through the 13th of August for Mercury Racing. So it's their 50th anniversary of Mercury Racing this year. So they've contracted F1 Powerboat and P1 Offshore to produce the race for them. So we're going to have offshore and tunnel boats there as well up in Sheboygan, Wisconsin.
Awesome. It's great how you're putting these things together because people just get to see all kinds of different kind of racing. That's very cool.
It is. And, offshore brings a lot of cool things to the table at their races. The awe factor is one of them, just how massive and how cool they are and the horsepower, and then the agile tunnel boats bring something else to the table, and how quick they turn and how they accelerate. But the cool thing about it is they complement each other, and our goal is to have less downtime for the fans, whether it be the live stream fans or the fans in person, so that way we can alternate the two. So we'll run a tunnel boat race, then we'll run an offshore race, and back and forth. I think it's going to be the hardest on the television crew.
They'll figure it out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. By Sunday afternoon, they'll have it down pat.
Yeah. Well, you guys will get a lot of good racing in, and spectators will get people that are there are going to enjoy it. So,
yeah, they will.
One thing I wanted to ask you, we talked about a little bit before we got on the air. So what's the difference between, there's an F1 circuit now in Europe. What's the difference between those boats and the motors and stuff? Is it close to what you guys are doing, or?
It's a little bit different. So the Europe, ever since the 2-liter Mercury went away, that was the last time that the European series and the American series had the same engine rules. So ever since probably the late 80s, the rules haven't been the same. So we've always had some more restrictions on our motors than what they have. And that's just our organization seeing one way to do it and their organization seeing another way to do it. And that's still the case today. These are Formula One boats. The boats are similar, but they also are specific to the engine package that they're racing. So theirs are probably, they've got some more horsepower than we do, because they have more of the equipment than we do and the boats. So you'll see different kind of courses. They like the right and left-hand courses, where the courses that we have, depending on the lay of the land and the body of water that we're racing, we'll throw all different kind of courses at them. And the reason we do that is because we've got to have those passing opportunities. So we always try and build the course for the best passing opportunities, because we want, at the end of the day, we want it competitive. And if it's competitive and we have passing, then we have a better show. And we're always just trying to build a better show. But the racing over, it's not only in Europe, but F1 H2O, they race in the Middle East They, in fact, they're racing, I think, this weekend or next weekend, in China.
China, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, so we've got our American boy over there, Sean Charente. So he's been world champion several times. So we want to wish him luck and bring it home for the for the Americans.
Yeah, absolutely. Is he the only American there right now?
We've got Brent Dillard now is over there,
Oh, okay.
and so we've got one on the Abu Dhabi team, and then we've got another one on the China team. So Brent's getting, this will be his second race over there, so he's still getting the feel of it, and we want to wish him good luck too. Sean's a veteran over there, won many races and championships, so we know he'll do good as well.
Yeah,
and then
fantastic.
Scott Gilman runs his own team over there, so he's got.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
know that. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool. Yeah, God, he's been doing it a long time too, right?
Yes, he has. In fact, I talked to him earlier this week.
Oh, that's awesome. That's good to know. I didn't know that. So, all right, I want to ask you about one more little fun tidbit that I see on your social media and stuff. Tell me about a class you have that looks really cool. Is a tri-hull class.
Those things are a blast. They're not easy to drive. I have driven one in testing. I never raced one, but the boats are based originally off, a 1970s tri-hull. But as they started racing them more and more, the class has developed. Now all the boats that you see out there are just specific built race boats because the old ones were too old and they've modified the design a little bit, but that's how the name came about as the tri-hull. So the limit is 99 cubic inches on the motors. There's a couple motors. The motor of choice at the moment has been the V4 OMC. We have just in the last 8 months got Mercury 115 Pro XS on the back of one of them, and it seems like it's coming around. So these guys race on a shorter course. It's a pace boat start, and they'll usually run, I think, 6 or 7 heats, including the final, on a weekend, and they're single pin turns. So these guys don't mind swapping paint. I mean, they have roll cages in them for protection, and they're a crowd favorite. And if the water isn't rough, it is by the time they get done.
Yeah, the photos look wild, and it seems like, and again, I just see it on social media. It seems like it's a lot of younger guys like to do it.
Well, not necessarily. No,
Not necessarily. Okay.
You got Scary Jerry Rinker, who's 78? He's still running.
Oh, he races one of those? Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Number
Wow.
52.
Nice. Yeah, and I think out here in SCSC out in California, I think they've got a couple of them out here too.
They do. Scott Wentz's son, Trevor, he's got one now. He hasn't raced it yet, but he's been driving it. And then Greg Foster he wants one. So we're gonna get some more of them out there for sure.
Oh my gosh.
And it's that's one of the reasons why we wanted to get a newer 4-stroke motor to be competitive on it. So that way somebody can go in and team up with their local Mercury dealer and get one of these in their local area and start racing. So that way we can get more people involved with boat racing.
Good. So it's on you, local Mercury dealer, to help these guys out.
That's right. That's right. You can sell them the motor. You can help them out. One thing about racers, they always need help.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I've had a note to ask you about those because it seems pretty intriguing. So, well, cool. We talked about where to find you. You did say you touched on it. Are all your races live streamed?
All our races are live streamed. You can find it on our YouTube channel, or you can find it on
Awesome.
our Facebook.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, hey, thank you very much. I really appreciate all the information and the glimpse of, outboard racing through the years. It's pretty cool. So I appreciate you coming on and spending time with us.
Well, thank you so much. And I just want to say hi to everybody out there, and hope you're a fan of powerboat racing, and come see us at a race, because it's always better live.
Absolutely. And good luck with the racing this year, and good luck with the series, and hopefully we'll see you out there.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Tim, take care.
Thank you for listening to Powerboat Talk. If you like what you've heard, please head over to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review. For more Powerboat Talk, follow us on Facebook or Instagram, or visit our website at powerboattalk.com.